Chapter 1821. Dual Bishops. Zhang Yi said calmly, as a country with the upper middle level of European strength, Rome has not received many challenges in their area. The three members of Juno's family are the most powerful trio in Rome. The abilities of the three can be used together, and even facing the White Bishop with a supernatural power index of 30,000 points, they are qualified to fight. An environment that is too comfortable will give people an illusion, and their awareness of danger will become weak. They may even forget the need to guard against death. Although he said so, Zhang Yi still supported his chin with both hands, with a solemn face. But even so, they were able to kill them all so quickly. The strength of this demon armor is a bit scary. Deng Shintong said, that may not be the case. Perhaps the ability of the demon armor can just restrain Juno's family, so the battle ended so quickly. Ability restraint is an extremely critical factor when aliens fight. Supernatural power. Zhang Yi uttered these two words gently. The fighting style of the demon mecha is very simple and brutal. In close combat, they rely on their indestructible bodies, which enable them to have close combat strength that is not inferior to that of the enhanced mutants. In long-range combat, they rely on technological weapons. The attack method seems simple, but it is actually the purest energy release, which is also easy to mass-produce. For defense, it is a high-level energy barrier. Just these are enough to give us a headache to deal with. However, if on this basis, they have abilities that we can't guess, then at the critical moment of the battle, they will become extremely dangerous. Deng Shintong took a breath. It sounds a bit scary. What do you think? What if they reach Samaran cities? Zhang Yi tilted his head. This is exactly the place. I can't see clearly. Oh, what do you mean? Deng Shintong looked at Zhang Yi, wanting to hear what ideas he had. Zhang Yi said, if the purpose of the mechanical civilization is to destroy us humans, then from the beginning, they only need to gather a part of their strength. Even if only 5 demon machines are dispatched, they can easily destroy the entire Fremons. Even the aliens in the Temple of the Gods cannot stop their killing. But they didn't do that. Instead, they pretended to be indifferent to humans. But now, why did they suddenly start to act so obviously again? It's like... Deng Shintong continued his words. It's like they are deliberately attracting us over. The two looked at each other and laughed. Zhang Yi said, this is what I don't understand the most. He raised his head and looked up at the sky. There was a huge polyhedron floating above the clouds, like the eyes of God observing the world. There are too many mysteries. These underground civilizations can hardly see any connection with each other. It was okay before, at least they were all carbon-based creatures. Now, even machines have emerged, which is really a headache. Zhang Yi rubbed his temples. Forget it. Let's just wait and see. At this time, a lazy voice came to his ears. To put it bluntly, it's still not strong enough. Zhang Yi didn't need to look back. He knew who was coming. It's really difficult to get close to a bishop-level alien of the space system silently. Ling took small steps, holding her head with both hands, and walked over lazily. Deng Shintong looked back at her and smiled gently. Miss Ling, do you have any new information? Ling said to the two with a smile. For the time being, not yet. Isn't this to see if I can get any information from you too, and then exchange it for some money? She made a circle with her thumb and index finger, palm up, and made a money gesture, with a greedy look on her face. Deng Shintong patted his forehead helplessly. I told you all. After this mission is over, you can go back to China with us. At that time, with the generosity of the big boss, you will not be treated unfairly. Deng Shintong patted Zhang Yi's shoulder. Don't you think so? Zhang Yi was indeed very interested in Ling. His Tianhai fortress is being rebuilt, and in the future, he wants to form a force of his own. And in this new force, a large number of excellent talents are needed. Of course, he would not refuse anyone like Ling, and Ling had been tested by Yang Xinxin, proving that she had no special purpose in appearing beside him. It seemed that she was just an underworld person who was exchanging intelligence for money. However, Zhang Yi still felt that she was a little mysterious because the confidentiality level of the intelligence she could obtain was too high. Well, let's just assume that she was too good. Ling, What do you think about Fremons and the mechanical civilization? I mean, where do you think the subsequent events will develop? Zhang Yi asked with a faint smile.
Ah,
Me? Ling pointed at her face in astonishment, and then said with a smile, I didn't expect that the famous Chaos would also ask me for advice. I am really flattered. But then she straightened her face, thought for a while, and said, I think it's very strange. The behavior of those mechanical life forms reveals a weird feeling. Zhang Yi nodded, and he felt the same way. It's like a performance, or a sacrificial ceremony, or something. She murmured to herself, with a somewhat uncertain tone, as if she was casually. Ling muttered to herself. But these words shocked Zhang Yi's heart, and it was like a thunderbolt in his mind. Performance, sacrifice? Can you think about the problem from this angle? Don't say it, don't say it. I never thought that I could analyze it this way. Zhang Yi's head really couldn't think of such a thing. He frowned and thought seriously for a long time, then raised his head and asked back. Then the sacrifice must have a goal. Who is their goal? Ling smiled but didn't say anything, just raised her head and looked up at the sky. Zhang Yi and Deng Shintong followed her gaze to the sky, and in an instant they understood what Ling meant. Everything that the mechanical civilization does is for the observers in the sky to see. Is that what you mean? There was a chaotic line in Zhang Yi's mind, which was slowly sorted out, as if finding a thread end from a complicated ball of wool, and then pulling out a complete line.
Zhang Yi
Suddenly remembered that when Fremons just had an accident, they planned to come to support. But the rhythm was interrupted by one thing, that is, the period when these polyhedrons appeared in the sky. Even the mechanical civilization in Fremons stopped its activities temporarily. Zhang Yi once had doubts. Is there any connection between the observer who suddenly appeared in the sky and the mechanical civilization in Fremons? Later, in the process of conquering the demon god Gui, he found the ruins deep in the earth. Combined with what he has learned so far, a guess that Zhang Yi had long suspected in his heart gradually became true. Zhang Yi touched his chin and began to speak out his inner thoughts. The observers in the sky and the mechanical civilization on the ground are not the same civilization. If my guess is correct, the observer civilization is a higher-level existence. The mechanical civilization is digging everywhere on the land of Fremons just to find the observer civilization, or to find something to sacrifice to the observer civilization. However, from the fact that the mechanical civilization stopped acting when the observer's detector appeared before, it can be seen that there is no communication between the two, and the mechanical civilization is not a vassal of the observer civilization. So, it is not clear for the time being what the purpose of the mechanical civilization is in looking for the observer civilization. As a general rule, low-level civilizations dare not contact high-level civilizations, and there will be a risk of being destroyed. Although I don't understand the purpose of the mechanical civilization since they chose to take the risk, there must be a reason why they have to do so. It's just that after such a long time of digging, they still haven't found what they want to find, until the situation changed later. Zhang Yi looked at Deng Shintong, and Ling had a nonchalant smile on her face, and Deng Shintong nodded, indicating that he agreed with Zhang Yi's reasoning. Zhang Yi then continued, that change was the emergence of humans. I think the mechanical civilization didn't care about our existence at first, so it didn't wipe out all the humans in Fremons. And when they went to war with us, the observer civilization gave feedback. Deng Shintong continued, does it feel like watching a coliseum? The fight between two different races will arouse the interest of the upper civilization. Just like humans will put various creatures in a sealed box and let them fight each other, just for their own amusement. Zhang Yi's analysis made things reasonable. The 369 observer detectors in the sky are the upper civilizations spying on the lower civilization. However, there is still one thing Zhang Yi didn't figure out. That is, the lost ruins he found under the earth after the battle with the demon god Gui. What are they? Is it the place where the mechanical civilization once lived? Zhang Yi felt that he was trapped in a huge vortex. Even as strong as he is now, he is just a tiny creature with a little self-protection ability in this huge vortex. The answers to everything may only be revealed after this battle ends. Zhang Yi stood up and went to look for Liu Karen. At the moment, he was eager to let Liu Karen and Yang Xinxin crack everything they got from the Black Room. As long as they knew which civilization the Black Room belonged to, they could probably figure out what caused everything that happened in Fremon's Galana State. There are a total of 14 members in the Knights of the Round Table, and all of them are present. In this battle, the target was personally chosen by King Arthur, Arthur Pendragon, the third highest demon god, Demon C. Zhang Yi chose Demon D. So King Arthur thought that he must not fall behind Zhang Yi, so he directly chose Demon C, which was theoretically more difficult than his task. King Arthur and Merlin led the team, followed by the 12 Knights of the Round Table. After the death of the Green Knight Bourse, the substitute was Knight of Doom, Gerald. The Knights of the Round Table are not short of elites. As long as King Arthur and the court magician Merlin are there, this team will always be a world-class team of aliens. So far, they are also the only team that has relied on an independent team to conquer the ruins of ancient civilizations and return successfully. When they arrived on the battlefield, they immediately faced tens of thousands of mechanical life forms. Among them were 5 combat-type super-large mechanical life forms, whose bodies like mountains faced them directly, and the energy furnaces had begun to gather, preparing to launch a terrifying attack. King Arthur stood in front of everyone holding the knight's sword in both hands. Seeing this huge army, a calm smile appeared on his face. It's been a long time since I experienced such a magnificent war. Isn't it? I can probably imagine how our ancestors galloped on the battlefield in ancient times. Merlin, dressed in white combat uniform, said beside him, "Let's get rid of Demon C first. I'll go with you." King Arthur's smile became even stronger. "No, you and them will deal with the other mechanical life forms, and I will deal with the demon." The first knight and deputy commander Lancelot said unconvincedly, "Those guys, we can deal with them." King Arthur said, "Lancelot, you do have the strength to fight on the battlefield. But don't forget, you are the deputy commander of the Knights of the Round Table. Not only do you have to consider yourself, but also fight side by side with your subordinates." The implication is that Lancelot's personal ability is not enough to protect the other members of the Knights. Lancelot was silent immediately. After returning from the Nash Kingdom under the Southwest region, his strength has been steadily improving with the help of the resources he obtained. Although it is far slower than Zhang Yi's improvement speed, his personal ability index has reached 23,000 points. Looking at the whole world, it is top level. Not in the first echelon, but close behind. But in front of the person in front of him, he still didn't dare to be presumptuous and could only obey orders. Merlin smiled and looked at King Arthur. "There is no need to work so hard. If the two of us join forces, we can win faster. As the Night King, I allow him to have a fair one-on-one duel with me." King Arthur rejected Merlin's kindness, because he knew that Zhang Yi must have relied on his own strength to defeat the demon god Goe. Zhang Yi's team was not as strong as his elite Knights of the Round Table. He had an idea in his heart to compete with Zhang Yi. Perhaps it was related to boss, and of course it was also related to the conversation between Tong Organization and him. Merlin smiled helplessly and sighed. "Okay, my respected king." On the battlefield, mechanical life forms densely packed the ground. There were tens of thousands of mechanical life forms, each of which was very large, and the smallest was comparable to a human truck. Such a scene was enough to make people feel their scalps tingling and even give birth to the desperate idea of being unable to win. But the people facing them were the strongest Knights of the Round Table in Britannia. On the back of an oversized mechanical life form, a black demon sat on a raised metal bar, looking coldly at the enemy in the distance. Demon C. He was the one who looked more like a human among the many demons, with a hideous ghost mask on his head. No, as a man-made man, that was not his mask, but his head looked like that. He had 2 long red and black tails behind him, and other than that, he was almost no different from a human. Behind him was an extremely large long sword. The blade was not curved, but straight, with a single-sided blade, and inlaid with red energy crystals. "Destroy them," Demon God C issued a combat order to all mechanical life forms. In an instant, tens of thousands of mechanical life forms had already condensed energy cannons and blasted forward. The whole world became bright, eliminating the gloomy gray and white tones of the end of the world. Merlin patted King Arthur on the shoulder with his left hand, then took 2 steps back and said with a smile, "You go.
Leave the other guys to us."
After that, he clenched his hands in the lower right position of his body, and a sword that was no different from the knight's 2-handed sword in King Arthur's hand was condensed by supernatural power. King Arthur bent his legs slightly, then jumped up suddenly, and his figure disappeared from the spot like lightning in an instant. Merlin led the 12 members of the Knights of the Round Table, and their figures quickly dodged the attacks of energy cannons and rushed to the battlefield. "Excalibur!" Merlin shouted loudly. Then he aimed his sword at the mechanical army in front and slashed it fiercely. A surge of supernatural power burst out from the blade, and the sword light tore through the barrage of mechanical life forms, directly covering a large number of mechanical life forms in front. Their bodies were shrouded in the powerful sword light, and the white sword light covered everything around them. Soon, only a huge crack was left on the ground, and all the mechanical life forms in this area were shattered. Merlin was very happy. "I've wanted to try this trick for a long time." Merlin tore a crack in the mechanical army with one blow. This powerful force was so strong that even Lancelot would be jealous. The second in command of the Knights of the Round Table was not him, but the court magician Merlin. He was a person whose strength was second only to King Arthur. No, strictly speaking, he had no desire to be king, but preferred to be an assistant, watching King Arthur ascend the throne step by step. He didn't like to show off, but Lancelot even felt that if Merlin and King Arthur dueled, it would be hard to say who would win. That's right, there are 2 bishops among the members of the Knights of the Round Table. The other Knights of the Round Table, the members were not willing to lag behind and rushed into the battlefield in a battle formation. Lancelot held a shield in his left hand and a knight's sword in his right hand, burning with the dark, fallen ash flame. He rushed left and right among the mechanical life forms, and his violent power could instantly cut those mechanical life forms into pieces. King Arthur used the flying ability of his combat suit to come right in front of Demon God C. Demon God C raised his head and looked at him with interest. He felt a little bit of threat from this human being, which came from the powerful energy reaction in his body. 2 mechanical life forms blocked Demon God C first, and a tank-type super-large mechanical life form, and the other is a collection of tower cranes with 6 huge mechanical arms. They opened their defense force fields at the same time, and then the muzzles burst out red energy cannons. This super-large mechanical life form is specially developed for combat. If it is placed in the peaceful era of mankind, any one of them can crush several human legions. The large-caliber energy cannon alone can easily penetrate a small city. But in the face of all this, King Arthur just smiled faintly in the air. His eyes were fixed on the Demon God C in front of him, and he didn't even spare a glance for the 2 super-large mechanical life forms. Then he raised the knight's sword that symbolizes the king with both hands. "Merlin, you just imitated it all," King Arthur said with a smile, and Merlin just chuckled in response in the communication channel. King Arthur's sword fell, and the sword light burst out from the tip of the sword. The powerful superpowers flowed into the long sword from both hands and then released. It looks like a simple move, but when used by a bishop-level alien, the power that burst out can be said to be earth-shaking. Wherever the sword light passed, everything became pale, including the 2 super-large mechanical life forms. Their attacks were swallowed up, their defense fields were broken, and their bodies were shattered by this blow. Broken steel sword. Wherever the king's sword passed, everything was conquered and unstoppable. No matter how strong the defense was, it would be broken. When he saw the sword, the eyes of Demon God C suddenly lit up. He stood up from the super-large mechanical life form and slowly pulled out the straight knife that was half of his body from his back with his right hand. He jumped up, and a strong will to fight broke out from the core furnace that had been silent for endless years. King Arthur smiled and raised his sword to chop at the enemy in front of him. Clang! The knight's two-handed sword collided with the straight knife of demon god Sea, and the terrifying energy instantly swept in all directions, drowning everything around. When this battle ended, 2 days and 2 nights had passed. The battlefield was desolate, and the wreckage of mechanical life forms was everywhere. Some members of the Knights of the Round Table were injured, and some were slightly embarrassed, but no one was killed. Merlin, the court magician, walked forward. King Arthur's sword finally cut off the head of demon god Sea. He supported the long sword with his exhausted hands and leaned on it to prevent his body from falling. However, in the past 2 days of fighting, he almost exhausted all his strength. No one expected that this battle would last so long, and no one expected that demon god Sea actually possessed powerful supernatural powers. It was a supernatural power similar to the human enhancement system, which could greatly improve his combat effectiveness, make his straight knife faster and more fierce, and make his body have indestructible defense capabilities. King Arthur fought too hard and almost died on the battlefield. However, the presence of 2 white bishop-level aliens at the same time gave them too great an advantage. Although it was just a raid, the psychological impact it brought could have a great impact when the masters duel. After 2 days and 2 nights, King Arthur killed the exhausted demon god Sea in a state of near exhaustion. There was nothing fancy about this battle. It was just a back-and-forth sword fight, a test of strength, skill, and endurance. In the end, it was King Arthur who won the battle.